Good morning, everyone. Yeah, okay. And welcome to today's event marking the launch of the GenderSAFE National Policy Monitoring Report on responses to gender-based violence in higher education and research. A warm welcome to all of you joining us here in the room, but also to all the people participating online. It is a pleasure to see such a diverse group of participants, representative from the European institution and national authorities, higher education and research organization, and the wider policy community. So welcome you all here. Before we begin, a few practical points. So we will open with a keynote intervention today, followed later by the presentation of the report main findings and the GenderSAFE institutional self-assessment tool. And then we will have a moderated panel discussion with representative of national authorities. At the end, we will have some time for Q&A with the audience, and also there will be a few questions for you on Slido. As a general rule, of course, we encourage a respectful discussion through the entire event. Please also note that this session is being recorded and then it will be available on the GenderSAFE channel afterwards. So I think that all the practical points have been said, and so I think that we can start our discussion. As you all probably know, the Gender Equality Strategy 2026-2030 has been released a few weeks ago. Gender-based violence occupies an important and, of course, worrying place across the EU, but there is also a growing recognition and attention toward this phenomenon. So this is not just an individual issue, it's really a structural issue. And of course, it directly affects what is the integrity, the quality, and the inclusiveness of our research and higher education system. The GenderSAFE project help us move forward in this direction to shed light on this phenomenon as a project that promotes zero tolerance toward gender-based violence in the European research area. By mapping what's happening across countries, it gives us a clear sense of where we stand today in the EU, what progress has been made, where the gaps are, and which actions need to be implemented. And what the speakers will present today all along this discussion will also give us a chance to step back and to reflect on how all these connect to the bigger European picture, so including the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct and the work within the European research area. So today is not only, we are not here only to present findings, but also to reflect on what the progresses mean in practice, how policies are implemented, and what supports change, and where further action is needed. So with that, I am very pleased to invite our keynote speaker, who is joining online, Maria Pilar Aguar Fernandez, who is director of the Directorate People, Health and Society at DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission, to open today's discussion.
Yes, hello everyone. It seems that my video refuses to let me be seen. I guess you hear me because I can see some of you nodding. But Jesus, give me a second. That's not okay. So, oh God, what do we do now? I guess that I have to. Oh, here we are. Ta-da! Again, let me see. It's not the right one. Let me try to fix these because otherwise I'll be looking like an Egyptian all the time, looking at the wrong camera.
We can hear.
Okay.
Okay, no, not anymore.
Okay. Okay. So it would seem that the good camera is not working, but I saw that the small one is working, perhaps. Okay. Well, listen, I'm not, this is a busy day for all of you, and I don't want to spend time with these small little issues because I'm very grateful that there you are. So I'm really happy that you're here, and I want, even if it is not ideal, but please bear with me. These things, technical things happen. So again, but let me start by saying something very personal. I'm very proud of being European for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons why I'm very proud of that is Europe excellence in research and innovation. It is really a land where we have outstanding results, but they don't happen miraculously. They do depend on the people who create them. And we need to have an environment that it really enables this excellent research and innovation. And this happens like in many of the places, workplaces, when the individuals feel respected, when they feel supported, when they free to share their ideas. So in these conditions, of course, innovations come naturally. There is creativity that thrives, and collaboration follows. And to be frank, I was shocked to hear from my colleagues and from you as well that across the research and innovation system, far too many researchers still experience gender based violence and harassment. It was really difficult to believe for me. And the natural question is how we can claim to support top research if people do not feel safe at work. I mean, at the end, this is not only a serious violation of dignity and the fundamental rights, but it also erodes the trust and the openness that are so necessary for good research to happen. So, if people do not feel safe at the research places, we lose their talent, we lose their ideas, we lose their perspectives. So, the careers are disrupted, the researchers leave, and the institutions miss out the diversity of voices that drive innovation forward. So, ensuring a safe and respectful research innovation environment is not only a matter of justice, but it's also a condition for excellence. So, this has been a priority for the Commission led by President Ursula von der Leyen. It is obviously a central pillar of the new gender equality strategy that the previous speaker has mentioned, which sets out some concrete actions to prevent violence, to support victims, and to strengthen the implementation of effective national responses. So, again, in the European research area, we have moved forward from recognizing the problem of gender based violence to try to develop concrete responses, policy responses, both at European level, at national level, and at institutional level. And the issue is not to develop the policy responses. The challenge now is to ensure that these commitments are translated into real change in the research organizations and everyday experience of the researchers. So let me just mention a few highlights on these. Um, an important step was uh, some time ago already, the introduction of the gender equality plans is a requirement for organizations that want to participate in Horizon Europe. So it is one of the recommended thematic areas of these plans to address gender based violence, including sexual harassment. One has to acknowledge that, I mean, in general, the response from the research institutions has been strong. So it's clear for us that this issue is one of the most frequently addressed by the gender equality plan. So this demonstrates that there is a problem, but there is also another part of it, which is the determination of the institutions to tackle it, to address it. So that's one of the things. The second important, perhaps, strand of work takes place in the European Research Area Policy Agenda, where, together with the member states, we work on advancing some of the common objectives and coordinate action. As it was also mentioned by the previous speaker, this is not a one-off or one uh, abnormality. This is a systemic challenge that requires coordinated action across the whole ecosystem. And I think that a particularly important milestone, also mentioned before, was the development of the zero tolerance code of conduct. And I want to say it again, thank you very much, because I know that many of you present around the table today and also online have contributed to this important work. So it is important for us, and I wanted to express my gratitude on that, because this gives us a shared framework for action, definitions, guiding principle, practical steps. All of it is very important. And it's the shared ambition of supporting member states, the research organization, and the wider research community in really building an environment that is free from gender based violence. A third element for that is or has been the support of the project funded under our research framework programs. You have played a very important role. Projects like UNICEF, Gender Action Plus are supported together with you around the table today. They have helped generate violence, really scientific based evidence. They have generated scientific based evidence to address these issues of gender violence. You are really developing tools, you're developing guidance, you're developing training materials that will support the institutions and the policy making. And you have also created space for dialogue and learning between all the people around the table, being it researchers, being it policymakers or practitioners. So this is really something that is a big contribution to address the issue of gender-based violence. Um, the work that is presented today on GenderSAFE is one of these critical elements. And I really want to stay on this for a moment because we live in Europe, we thrive in Europe, we work in Europe, but this is not the European Commission or some obscure person in a Brussels-based office. We can't do this alone. This is not the Commission bringing, an action plan or a strategy. We must, all of us, uh, work together to turn these commitments into real change. And it can't be done only if we are working at the EU level. We also depend on what happens at national level. And that is pretty important because indeed we need to work hand in hand with governments and national authorities to ensure that these policies, these guidelines, this research is translated into concrete measures. And this is not the same everywhere. So we also need to understand how countries address gender-based violence in their innovation system, in their research system, how this ecosystem work and how they can be made a safer place. So the um, the overview that's going to be presented today is extremely valuable. It is important because through it we will get a clearer picture of how national frameworks are evolving and how governments in different places in Europe are responded to these issues of gender-based violence in research and innovation. And I really would like to see that this finding show that we are really step by step addressing the problem, and that we show together that policies are becoming more the norm, are more systematic, and that are firmly embedded in the national research system. So um, it would be really encouraging to see that the European research area as a whole is really translating these steps into real progress. So that's something that I'm really hopeful to see today. Quite importantly, the insights. I mean, not all the work is done. Let me also acknowledge that, and but we are firmly convinced that the insight generated through your work will be crucial for us, or will be critical for us to inform the actions that we're preparing. Some of the actions that we are preparing at EU level, including the action plan for women in research, innovation, and startups, which is on the make, and the Future ERA Act. These national evidence, or the evidence on national approaches, it's going to help us ensure that our initiatives or proposals respond to the realities faced in our countries and our institutions. So for us, your work is really one of the cornerstone on our objective, which is very clear. It's that the European research area is a place where every researcher can work with dignity, can work safely, and feels respected. So again, there's a lot of work happening. We need to continue strengthening the policy. We need to continue sharing the good practices, and we need to continue cooperating, because only through our commitment, our sustained commitment, our common commitment, we would create really the right environment so we can see science and innovation thriving in Europe. Because at the end of the day, um, excellence in research is something that has a very simple, well, not so simple, a very important prerequisite, that the people who are doing research, whoever they are, wherever they are, can do their work in an environment that is free from violence and free from discrimination. So thank you for your work and your contribution to that. I will be very attentive to the outcome of the meeting. Again, thank you very much. And I just want to close by telling you that I wish you a lot of fruitful discussions for today and also for the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for this thoughtful presentation and strong words too. Thank you, because you mentioned that we need real changes, and I think that today we're going to discuss also this necessity. Thank you very much. Feel free to stay with us as much as you can. And now we are going to listen to Marcela Linkova, HERA Forum Subgroup Member State Co-Chair, who is going to present the ERA policy agenda and Member State actions to combat gender-based violence. Marcela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marta. Good morning, everyone, both here and online. It's really great to see you all here. So we're meeting today to discuss the role that national authorities have in advancing policies to combat gender-based violence in higher education and research, and to see where we currently stand in Europe. And this is not an easy terrain, and it's also a specific one. It's not easy because we sometimes hear the high value of academic freedom invoked to stop actions to counteract gender-based violence, as if freedom to do scientific research was an infringement on counteracting gender-based violence. And it's specific too because we are dealing with a system where we have young adults entering systems that are highly hierarchical, and where we have a lot of dependency. So this is the specificity. And so my aim with this short intervention is to set the scene for the policy monitoring findings, which Anastasia will present later, and what they matter for the ERA. So I will start with the numbers. The UNICEF project has already been mentioned. In 2022, UNICEF collected over 42,000 responses across 46 research performing organizations in 15 countries. And this evidence confirmed what essentially practitioners and researchers have known since the 1970s, that gender-based violence is not marginal, that it's actually extremely widespread, and that it is a systemic issue that has real consequences, not only for research careers, but also for organizational climate, for excellence and integrity of the research environment. The UNICEF prevalence results show that gender-based violence, as I said, is widespread and takes multiple forms. The most common is psychological violence, followed by sexual harassment. But the key point that I want to underline is not a single issue. The fact that over 60% of people responding to the survey have reported at least one form of violence that they have experienced, but that this is really a systemic issue embedded in our research and higher education institutions. When we look at the reasons for not reporting, we can see something really staggering. The most important reasons given are that people were unsure whether the behavior that they have experienced was serious enough to report, and also they did not recognize the behavior at that time as violence. This speaks to the permissiveness of the behaviors in our higher education and research systems, and the fact that we do not set clear boundaries for what is right and what is not right. The other reasons that you can see on the slide is also people do not report because they do not know who to tell. They don't believe that anything will happen. They fear retaliation. And so when we ask whether national frameworks are effective, we also need to ask whether they make reporting and support for victim survivors safer and more credible in practice, because the findings are really alarming in the sense that we do not create systems that people can trust. So the experience on the ground is that people face multiple gaps in the support systems, unclear procedures. The issue is avoided. We see formalism, denial. Sometimes people experience threats and retaliation. We also see disproportionate impact on minoritized groups linked to disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, race and ethnicity, and others. The formal reporting channels are perceived as unsafe, and so this leads to silencing, attrition, and informal coping by people who experience violence. I will now go to the EU policymaking. Despite the severity of the issue, it has not been until 2020 that at the EU policy level we started addressing gender-based violence and sexual harassment. That year, the Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation launched the first policy mapping and issued recommendations. Following this, the 2021 Ljubljana Declaration included gender-based violence among its 6 priorities. And so this is where things started moving. The Ljubljana Declaration then underwrote the ERA policy agenda for 22-24, and this set the stage for adoption of the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct. And here we are now with the current policy agenda when we're focusing on the implementation of this code. And as already mentioned, we have 2 projects, very important projects that the European Commission funded that helps to also keep these activities on track, and that's UNICEF, which established the prevalence, which I reported, but also developed the 7P conceptual framework to understand how policies need to be built, and conducted national policies mapping, institutional policies, examined the consequences. And now with GenderSAFE, we have a community of practice which advances the policy evolution further. We are doing capacity building in GenderSAFE, and we will also hear about the self-assessment tool that has been developed. So going forward to the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct, I will just say very quickly that it was adopted in 2024. It's organized around 3 pillars, and the action pillar is built around the seven P's with prevalence, prevention, protection, prosecution, provision of services, partnership, and policy. So the policy mapping that we conducted aims to look at the national policy instruments that we have in place, analyze the comprehensiveness of the policy frameworks and their alignment with the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct, identify gaps, document the recent and ongoing policy developments, and inform the future EU policy coordination. And so very quickly, and you will hear from more from Anastasia, what we can see is that we have policy trajectories emerging with early starter countries now moving towards review of their policies and further advancement. And we have newcomers to this action where we can see new policies or activities being developed. We can also see a very heterogeneous landscape from countries that have very comprehensive policies to countries that actually have not started moving forward. And you can see the spread here in this map. The countries, and we have known this for some time, that have comprehensive policies in place are Belgium, France, Ireland, Netherlands, and Portugal, in line with the methodology that we have developed. We can see also a policy pattern, strong development since 2023 especially. We can see that the alignment with the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct is very limited, and you will hear details about this later. Commitment is the weakest, accountability, we can see some movement, and so most of what we do focuses on the action. The positive thing is that countries that participated in the survey report a positive outlook for the development of the policies or remaining where they are. So we did not have any country reporting that they would be going back. But of course, resourcing and sustainability of the policy outlook are a risk. And so with this, thank you very much. And we will go for the details.
Thank you very much, Marcela. Thank you for this insightful overview. We now turn to the gender-safe policy mapping that will be presented by Anastasia Bogoslavec, Institute of Sociology of the Czech Academy of Science.
Hello, thank you for joining us today, and I will present a closer look at the pillars of the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct and how European countries align with them. I will start with a brief overview of the methodology and then move on to the results, focusing on commitment, action, and accountability. The data were collected through an online questionnaire in October and November 2025. The questionnaire was developed in a previous GenderSAFE project, as a part of a previous GenderSAFE task, and it was administered via Lime survey. The respondents were national public authorities responsible for research and innovation and/or higher education policy. The dissemination was coordinated through the ERA Forum subgroup on inclusive gender equality, as well as the broader ERA Forum for countries not part of the subgroup. The target group included the 27 EU member states, and associated countries under Horizon Europe. In total, the 18 countries contributed, including 15 EU member states and 3 associated countries. The scope of the data covers a self-reported information on national policy instruments, addressing gender-based violence in research, innovation, and higher education. It was checked by the GenderSAFE team and verified with the responding parties. Our analysis focuses on the extent to which European countries are aligned with the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct, which is structured around a three-pillar policy approach. Each pillar, commitment, action, accountability, covers a set of conditions that were translated into measurable indicators within the GenderSAFE monitoring methodology. And today I will focus on the results across these indicators, so I will briefly introduce what each of the pillars entails. The commitment pillar focuses on the recognition of gender-based violence as a systemic issue and on whether policies are guided by zero tolerance principles. The pillar includes 4 indicators. The action pillar is, as mentioned before, built around the UNICEF 7P framework and translates commitment into concrete measures, and this pillar includes 14 indicators. The accountability pillar captures mechanisms that ensure implementation and oversight, including reporting, monitoring, leadership responsibility, and consequences for non-compliance. This pillar has 5 indicators. The analysis of these pillars included only countries whose policy instruments reached at least an intermediary level. This means that countries where either a general policy framework is in place or a dedicated initiatives exist. Not included were countries with gender equality policies or laws or anti-discrimination laws that do not address in any way gender-based violence in any form in higher education and or research. We will first go over commitment. This is how the commitment indicators are structured across different levels, from comprehensive to absent. At the top, a comprehensive approach requires recognition of multiple elements of systemic nature of gender-based violence, a broad definition of priority groups, and the inclusion of zero tolerance principles. As we move down the scale, fewer of these elements are included, until at the lowest level, none of them are addressed. The results are presented in this map. We can see the distribution of commitment levels across countries. No countries reaches a comprehensive or developing level. 8 countries, as you can see on the map, fall into the intermediary category, including Austria, Czechia, France, Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Sweden, and Norway. At the same time, 4 countries, Belgium, Denmark, Lithuania, and Poland, are categorized as absent, meaning that none of the key elements of commitment are reflected in their policies. These are the individual commitment indicators that were included in the analysis. Out of the 12 countries that were analyzed, 7 recognized the systemic nature of gender-based violence in their policy instruments. However, only 2 countries promote trauma-informed and victim survivor-centered approaches. 3 countries recognize the intersectional nature of gender-based violence, and 5 define specific priority groups. Sweden stands out as the only country that covers 4 out of the 5 indicators, including trauma-informed and victim-centered approaches, as well as recognition of both the systemic and intersectional nature of gender-based violence. Only 5 countries explicitly define specific priority groups in their policy instruments. Across these countries, the most recognized groups are people with disabilities and diverse sexual orientation, both included in all 5 cases. Ethnic and racial minority groups are all relatively well represented, appearing in 3 countries. Beyond these, the inclusion of other groups becomes much more fragmented. Several groups are not addressed at all across the analyzed policies, including gender identity, gender expression, intersex people, and categories such as neurodiversity or chronic illness. Overall, this suggests that while some forms of vulnerability are recognized, the approach to defining priority groups remains selective and lack a comprehensive intersectional perspective. Now we move on to the next pillar, action. The names of the indicators remain consistent across all 3 pillars. In the case of action pillar, the indicators are derived from the previously mentioned UNICEF 7P framework. In total, 9 indicators are included. While they are grounded in the 7P framework, the 2 areas are explored in greater depth, specifically policy and protection. to better capture the scope of national level action. To be classified at a comprehensive level, a country must have at least 8 out of the 9 actions included in its policy instruments. As you can see, no country reaches the comprehensive level, which indicates that none of the analyzed policy frameworks cover the full range of actions. And 5 countries, Belgium, Denmark, France, and Ireland, and Portugal, fall into the developing category. 4 countries, Czechia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, and Sweden, are classified as intermediary. Austria is the only country in the emerging category, while Poland and Norway are classified as absent. Here we have a more in-depth look at the responses. This is the most extensive pillar with 14 indicators. 5 countries require or recommend that institutions adopt comprehensive policies to address gender-based violence. The same number of countries embed the issue within institutional change processes, for example, through gender equality plans. However, when we move to the implementation and follow-up mechanisms, the picture becomes weaker. Only 3 countries require or recommend monitoring of these policies. Notably, none of the analyzed countries include requirements to evaluate the effectiveness of their policies. This suggests that while policy adoption is relatively present, mechanisms to assess and ensure their effectiveness remain largely absent. These indicators are related to prevention and capacity building. As you can see, staff training is required or recommended in 5 countries. It is mandatory in Belgium and Lithuania, while in Ireland it's voluntary. Student training is slightly less common, with 4 countries requiring or recommending it. It is mandatory in Lithuania and voluntary in Ireland and the Netherlands. Capacity building for senior management is very limited, present in only 1 country. Capacity building for middle and supervisory management is required or recommended in just 2 countries. Training for staff that is responsible for case handling is more common, with 5 countries including this measure. And none of the analyzed countries require or recommend active bystander intervention training. Here we have a closer look at the capacity building for different levels of institutional leadership. Overall, this type of training is very limited. As I said before, only 1 country, France, explicitly recommends capacity building for senior management. Capacity building for staff in managerial positions is also present in just 1 country. And 2 countries, France and the Netherlands, include training for staff in supervisory roles. Capacity building is not yet systematically targeted at leadership roles. And looking at the last 4 action indicators, we can see that the most commonly included element is reporting mechanisms, which are required or recommended in 8 countries. Data collection on prevalence and incidence is present in 7 countries, and partnerships are included in 5 countries. Awareness-raising campaigns are the least common, appearing in only 3 countries. These are the types of data collection that are included in national instruments. Administrative data collection appears most frequently. Surveys that include questions on gender-based violence are utilized in 3 countries. Gender disaggregated data collection, institution-wide prevalence studies or surveys, and monitoring of disciplinary and grievance procedures are done by 2 countries. Aspects such as the inclusion of all gender identity groups and the possibility for intersectional analysis are absent. Regarding reporting mechanisms, most countries require that at least a basic structure is in place. A designated contact point and formal complaint channels are the most common elements. However, there is a drop when it comes to more accessible options. Informal channels are less frequent, and anonymous reporting mechanisms are limited to only a few countries. The inclusion of partnerships in national policies is relatively limited. Where partnerships are present, they are with NGOs, other research organizations, or student initiatives. No country reported more integrated collaboration, for example, with health services, community organizations, or international partners. And now I will move on to the last pillar of Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct, accountability. For the accountability pillar, countries are classified based on the number of elements included in their policy frameworks. These include monitoring of policies through indicators, formal evaluation processes, reporting from institutions on actions taken, reporting on allocated budget, clear responsibility for senior management, and the presence of sanctions in case of non-compliance. For a country to reach a comprehensive level, at least 5 of these elements out of 6 need to be in place. Looking at the distribution of accountability mechanism across countries, 4 countries reach a comprehensive level, namely Austria, France, Ireland, and Sweden. Most countries are concentrated at the lower end of the scale, with several classified as emerging. Czechia, Denmark, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Poland, and Portugal, and Norway. And lastly, Belgium and Lithuania have no accountability mechanisms at all. Here we can see that the accountability indicators, 6 countries assign responsibility for implementation to senior management. 5 countries have sanctions in place for non-compliance, and 5 also evaluate the effectiveness of their policies. Monitoring of implementation is present in 4 countries, and only 1 country has measures to prevent multi-site serial misconduct. Taking a closer look at monitoring and evaluation, no country has a dedicated budget allocated for monitoring. 4 countries, Austria, Denmark, Ireland, and Sweden, foresee the use of monitoring to inform further policy making, while France and the Netherlands have defined monitoring indicators. On the evaluation side, Ireland and the Netherlands have allocated a budget for evaluation. 3 countries, Denmark, Ireland, and Sweden, foresee using evaluation to inform further policy making. And to conclude, 15 out of 27 EU countries responded to the GenderSAFE survey, and although not all countries are included, existing evidence suggests that only a limited number of additional countries have dedicated policies in this area. The overall landscape remains strongly heterogeneous, with dedicated policies showing more comprehensive coverage, while broader frameworks often lack a systemic approach. At the same time, commitment emerges as the least developed pillar, indicating gaps in how gender-based violence is recognized and embedded within national policy frameworks, and a critical lacking element is the integration of victim-centered and trauma-informed approaches, which we can see remain insufficiently integrated across policies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, for your presentation. And before moving to our next one, I invite you to take part in a quick Slido interaction. So the question is, what were you most surprised by? What stands out most to you from the findings? I guess that you have to scan the QR code, but you know perfectly how to do it. Let's see, heterogeneity. At the moment, it seems there is consensus around heterogeneity, lack of intersectional perspective, accountability, absence, lack of capacity building for senior management. Okay. Lack of comprehensive policies, lack of evaluation. Okay, we see that there is this lack of accountability in specific country systems. Okay. I think that we have some time now for a very short round of a Q&A of if any of the speaker wants to react about these inputs from Slido, or if someone from the audience wants to complement what has just been typed on Slido, feel free. Any reaction or comments? Yes, Rokutsu, please.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think what I really found striking is the issue of like not understanding when it is actually abuse. And this is very important because this is an experience that you have every day at work, at school, and the fact that we cannot even like identify it, then how do we get to the process of, you know, coming up with systems to prevent it? And I think we really need to start having conversations of, you know, not only agency, but also like, you know, teaching people as well, because it's so striking that, you know, you second guess yourself like, wait, was I actually abused? Yeah, I found that really disturbing.
Thank you very much, Rokutsu. If any reaction, any other comments? I think that in this case we can move to the next presentation. Thank you very much for participating in this Lido interaction. So we'll now explore the GenderSAFE institutional self-assessment tool with Lutz Marchert from Yellow Window. Lutz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta. Hello, everyone. So parallel to this monitoring mechanism for gauging policies at the national level in Europe, GenderSAFE has also developed a tool for assessing, monitoring, evaluating institutional policies. And this is what I'm going to present to you now. It's a self-assessment tool. It's free, it's online, and it allows institutions to assess their capacity and their progress over time if they wish to repeat the assessment, so they can see where they are going. It's a self-assessment tool that builds on the knowledge collected in UNISAFE. We have heard about it before, in GenderSAFE, and it's similar to a tool that you may know that stems from the Casper project. It's based on impact drivers, and the impact drivers are key elements that are required for institutional policies to be effective. There are 7 impact drivers in this model, and every impact driver comes with 1 to 7 indicators. In total, there are 18. And progress is assessed along 6 stages of institutionalization, which represent the institutional progress over time and over the different areas of the model. So here you see the 7 impact drivers and the 6 stages of institutionalization that capture the maturity of the institutional policy development. On this slide, you see the first 5 impact drivers together with their indicators. And these indicators capture specific aspects of each impact driver, and so the reality of the institutional performance. The last impact driver is the one that comes with most indicators. It's the one that captures the 7 Ps. So each of the 7 Ps is also assessed. As an example, we show here impact driver 3, which is victim-centered approach for addressing gender-based violence, and its first indicator. And you see that every stage of institutional development comes with a rubric, and this rubric describes the situation in the institution which the users have to assess. So they have to indicate in the model which is the situation that best represents their institutional policy development stage. And in bold are the elements that reflect the difference from the previous level. We recommend users, if they are in doubt, to indicate the lower level, not the higher one. Every higher level assumes that all the elements of the lower stages are in place. Now, why should institutions use this self-assessment tool? It provides an at-a-glance picture of the institution's strengths, weaknesses, and it thus points to priorities. It provides evidence for internal advocacy, so it gives you arguments, or it gives the change agents arguments to turn to their leadership and to ask for change in particular areas. If the assessment is repeated over time, it allows to monitor progress and to clearly see where the areas are where further action, resources, and efforts are needed. It allows strategic planning. It fosters collective reflection, discussion, learning, and priority setting in the institution. We recommend that a small team from different areas of the institution, can be like people from human resources department, equality officers, ombuds, people from senior management who have a responsible position for the area of gender-based violence, harassment, discrimination, take part in the assessment. And they organize a dedicated session, normally about 3 hours, to complete the exercise together. The tool comes with a number of guidance instruments. There are terms of use. There is a PDF that is a preview of the tool. It comes with glossary, frequently asked questions, the explanations on how to complete the assessment. And we recommend the users to go through these materials prior to this session together, so they can familiarize themselves with the structure, with the impact drivers, the logic of the tool, with the rubrics, and that the purpose is to indicate where their institutions find themselves. So the discussions all focus on finding consensus in the small group on where is our institution and for which reasons do we assess our institution at that particular stage. Upon completion, the users receive a report through the system, it's an automated process, and that report contains a spider graph that shows for each of the impact drivers where the institution is, with a narrative report describing the situation, but also pointing out which are or should be the priorities. So what is the way forward, and what are the recommendations for next steps towards the stage of institutionalization, which is the one to aspire to. The tool is available on the UniSafe toolkit and also on the website of GenderSAFE. What is the advantage for the institutions? I have explained that. They receive a report with recommendations. But what is also the advantage of this tool is that the software collects the input from the institution and it allows to produce also aggregated reports across institutions, across countries, across the EU. So we will be able, when there is a sufficient number of responses in the software, to compare the progress across countries and in regions of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lutz, for this presentation. And before we move to our panel, I would like to see if there are any questions for Lutz or also for the other speakers. In that case, I think that we can move to our next panel, but I would like to ask you for an applause again for our speakers. Thanks so much. There is a change of scene, so just a few minutes. Okay, I think that now we can proceed with our panel. So with this perspective in mind, I am happy to to moderate this important panel. The discussion today will focus on how national approaches to gender-based violence in research and higher education have evolved during the over the past 2 years. We will look at what has driven this change, how different actors are working together in specific member states, and how national efforts connect to broader European coordination. We will also explore today how EU-level action adds the most value, particularly in terms of mutual learning, common standards, and data. But we will also discuss and conclude with identifying a few concrete next steps for the next few years. And with that, I am very pleased to turn to our panelists. So we have with us today, I will go in the order, Jenny Rothwell from the Higher Education Authority of Ireland, Magdalena Chrobak-Tatara, Ministry of Science and Higher Education in Poland, We have with us Raffaela Ebersteiner from the Federal Ministry of Women, Science and Research in Austria. And we have Maria Bustelo from the Ministry of Science, Innovation and University of Spain. Welcome to our panelists. And let's start with our first questions about what changed on gender-based violence in research and higher education in your national context. So why this matter, and also what facilitated this change? Magda, let me start with you. Because in Poland we saw many developments in the past year, in 2025, with trainings and other activities funded by the Ministry of Science and Higher Education. Can you tell us more about this development, how they work, and how what made them possible?
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you very much, Marta. Good morning to all the participants here in Brussels and online. Let me start with a word of thank you to the GenderSAFE project for inviting me to this panel debate. And I think that the project has indeed greatly contributed to increased policy attention to the topic of gender-based violence in higher education and science. And this policy attention is what we have witnessed in Poland, I would say, over the last 2 years, as the safety, well-being of the academic community has indeed been have been priority of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education. And when it comes to the specific, to the concrete measures that we have taken, in January this year, Minister of Science and Higher Education announced a so-called anti-discrimination package, and it comprises a set of proposals, including legislative ones, for equality and counteracting mobbing in the academic community in higher education institutions in Poland. I would like to say that these proposals stem directly from the recommendations that were elaborated by the advisory bodies that operated at the ministry last year. This was Council for Women in Higher Education and Science, and another team whose name is quite long. It's called Advisory Team for Developing Good Practices and Mechanisms for Counteracting Mobbing and Supporting Well-being and Mental Health Prevention in the Higher Education and Science System. So let me shortly delineate the direction of the proposed changes. The proposals concern such issues as introducing an academic ombudsperson for the entire academic community, mandatory anti-mobbing training and publication of anti-discrimination procedures by the higher education institutions, because right now the law imposes only a general obligation to conduct occupational health and safety trainings at institutions. Apart from that, the anti-discrimination package foresees adopting a code of ethics for the academic community, as well as the plans of establishing mandatory gender equality plans. I would say that these proposals are a direct response to the voices of the academic community and some instances of some reports of abuse that took place at higher education institutions in Poland. And as our minister underlined when presenting this package, he said that it sends a clear message. Polish universities must be safe places, free from violence, discrimination, and mobbing. We see it as a harbinger of concrete changes to the law. And as for the enablers, I would like to say that I think it was commitment and engagement on the part of the management of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, as well as its openness to dialogue, cooperation with stakeholders that prepared the recommendations that were later taken up by the ministry. So in my opinion, these were the two crucial enabling factors.
Thank you very much, Magda. Rafaela, let's continue with Austria, because in Austria, the European research area policy framework is a very important reference point. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, of course. Also for me, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here, even if I'm extremely nervous. But okay, we will do. I will do it. So yes, I think that last year we took a very important step in Austria. So for the first time, the Federal Ministry of Women, Science and Research carried out a systematic status quo survey on measures against gender-based violence at Austrian higher education and research institutions. And this survey, so the analytical framework of this survey was based on the GenderSAFE 7P model, but adapted to 6 core dimensions for the national context. So it was conducted by the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute for Fundamental and Human Rights in Vienna. And it gave us a comprehensive and comparable national picture of existing institutional and legal frameworks, of gaps, and of sectoral differences across the whole research and higher education sector system. So this provided us with a detailed evidence base for development. And the results clearly show that there is already a large number of initiatives and measures in place, but they differ in their level of development. They are sometimes not well known at the institution, or sometimes strongly dependent on individuals. So yeah, what the study also did is it maps the complex and fragmented legal framework we have. Yes, and the recommendations from this survey therefore made it very clear that we need coordinated action at national level. And as a first response, we integrated some of the recommendations into 2 of the ministry's central steering instruments. They have clear responsibilities, they have clear timetables, and these instruments are called National Action Plan Against Violence Towards Women, and the second one is the National Action Plan for the European Research Area. And I will talk about the second one a little bit later. So yes, a central part of this will be the participatory development of a national framework for institutional codes of conduct and violence protection concepts. And for this, of course, the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct is extremely important. And we will build this framework with the help of external expert support, also with the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute, who did the survey. And we are setting up a stakeholder working group, which will meet actually in 1 month. And yeah, and then we will work on agreeing on a common understanding of gender-based violence, of developing minimum standards in terms of content and processes, and we will develop this modular framework I talked about. And when it comes to the enabling factors, I would say that several factors have worked together, but especially 3 were very important. So the first is evidence. So here again, the results of UNICEF, and after that, our national status quo survey, they have shown very clearly that gender-based violence is not a marginal issue, but a structural problem that affects students, staff, institutions, and subsequently the whole research area. So it became unacceptable to do nothing in this field. Yeah, and the second is the political will and the window of opportunity. So the whole federal government in Austria made a clear commitment to combating violence towards women within the National Action Plan Against Violence Towards Women, and we used this action plan and integrated the higher education and research sector, and we work there with the term of gender-based violence. And also the second instrument I talked about, the ERA-NAP, is supported by several ministries, not only our ministry. In the case of the gender equality initiatives, there are 3 ministries involved. And I think all of this sends an important signal that preventing and addressing gender-based violence is a cross-cutting responsibility and is not limited to the gender experts. And the third and last thing for this is EU framework and coordination. So the ERA policy agenda and the work of the ERA Forum subgroup on inclusive gender equality, they were key drivers for us. So they raised the visibility of the issue, and they also helped to strengthen national networks. Yes, I would say that's all for now.
Thank you very much, Raffaella. So we will also discuss about this coordination with the EU at a later stage. Before I ask my question to Jenny, I just would like to clarify something about what I'm seeing in the chat, because there has been a little bit of disconnect between the questions online. We will reopen Q&A at the end, so we will take the questions afterwards. We will have some times later, so no worries at all. We have the list of questions. Yeah, so now I will turn to Jenny about Ireland. Ireland has just completed a review of its policy safe, respectful, supportive and positive, ending sexual violence and harassment in Irish higher education institutions. That, if I'm not mistaken, is it's now the framework for consent in higher education. Can you tell us more about it? What are the findings and also the implications for the next policy cycle?
Thanks, Marta, and thanks, GenderSAFE, for the opportunity to be on the panel. It's really nice to be here and see everyone in the room and online, so thank you. So some of you have been working a lot with us in Ireland or know a lot about what has been happening, but just to give a quick overview, the policy that Marta mentioned, that has been in place since 2019, and it's enabled many changes to take place in the Irish higher education sector. So primarily, it's kind of brought this realization that higher education should work actively to end sexual violence and harassment, that institutional culture change is absolutely critical in terms of doing this, and that there's a need for dedicated policies, training, resources across the board. So within this first kind of iteration of the framework, there were national surveys of experiences of sexual violence and harassment conducted for staff and students. And then following on from those surveys, a national implementation plan was developed to kind of develop national actions that could respond to some of the key findings. Something really important that's happened since 2019 as well is that now we have annual funding for dedicated sexual violence prevention and response managers in higher education institutions. So this is about enabling experts in this area to lead out on institutional implementation of these policies. So this is really, really important and has been a real catalyst for change within our institutions. So these roles are in place in 16 higher education institutions in Ireland now. We know though that one person is not enough, and this needs to be a whole of institution approach, you know, as well as that, but it's really important that there's expertise there. So 2024-25 academic year marked 5 years of implementation of this policy framework. So we know that the issue was not solved, but we can definitely say that the landscape has changed. So in 2025, the Higher Education Authority, where I work, we put together an independent expert group to review this policy and its implementation, to kind of look at progress that's happened across the board, and then also to make recommendations for how we could update the framework. So we would see the framework as still being really valid and the work is going in the right direction, but what changes do we need to make now to make it relevant for 2026 and the future? So the the expert group, some of the members will be really familiar to you, especially if you're working on the GenderSAFE project. So it was chaired by Dr. Anna Bull, and the other members were Professor Frederick Lufstrup Bundestam, Tony McMahon, and Nolene Blackwell. So they engaged in this really productive consultation process with our higher education sector, and then they developed 12 revised outcomes for this updated framework that we're putting together. There's some key updates. A lot of the key focus of the work in Ireland is on prevention and response, but some of the updates and recommendations for a stronger focus in the revised framework are around a greater focus on safety measures, so that institutions can support people even when they maybe don't want to make a formal report or go down a formal route. There's still that option. And also then greater institutional transparency, including publication of data and information around this work. There's also national discussion of, and through this consultation process, there was national discussion of emerging areas that really were not as prominent in 2019. So things like image-based sexual abuse, stalking, cyber harassment, and also this idea of safer recruitment to prevent mobile serial perpetration as well across institutions or even across countries. So something that was important for us as well was that the expert group concluded that the terminology we use in Ireland, so we're using sexual violence and harassment rather than gender-based violence at the moment, but they concluded that this terminology is still valid, mainly because a lot of institutions have only very recently published their policies and are trying to work on this kind of first implementation of them. But there were really strong arguments for using the language of gender-based violence and that idea of it being on a continuum within the consultation that we conducted. So what the revised framework, what the expert group report has done and what the revised framework is trying to do is set out that, sexual violence and harassment, this is a pathway towards using that language of gender-based violence kind of within this next implementation period. And some of our higher education institutions are actually already using that terminology, so this is really positive. We have early this year shared a very tentative first draft of a revised framework with the sector. So we've received some really comprehensive feedback from different institutions. And then we'll be moving towards, redrafting, incorporating that feedback. And then when we get a bit closer to a final draft, we'll try and develop then a reporting or monitoring template as well to go with it. So being engaging in this process of doing a review has been absolutely invaluable to our work in the Higher Education Authority. It's a way to look at progress, but it's also looking at how we can move forward, how we can keep momentum, but also acknowledge that there's lots of new challenges to address as well.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for this very rich presentation and overview. And now I will turn to Maria. Spain is one of the countries that has a very robust policy for the higher education and research sector because you have a strong protocol. Can you tell us more about the policy and what is the current state of implementation?
Thank you so much. Okay, first I would also like very much to thank my colleagues from GenderSAFE for inviting me on behalf of the Spanish Ministry. It's really good for me because I was involved in a UNICEF project with them, so from the Complutense University. So. Yes, we have a very strong legislative base because we have the mandatory protocols both in universities and in research centers. They have been during these years, it has been generalized. When I say that we have this strong legislative base, is because it's from universities, it was 2007, and from research centers, 2011. So what has changed in these last 2 years? We are still generalizing the idea of having the protocols, the mandatory protocols. Especially, I mean, universities have this from before, but in the research centers, they have been generalized during these last years. And of course, the legislative base has been renovated with a new University Act in 2023 and modification of the science law in the 2022. So there are, for example, symbolic in this legislation, symbolic but important messages, like, for example, in the new University Act for constituting a new university, so a private or even a public, it is mandatory to have a protocol. For example, this is one of the new things. But of course, we have also I mean, I think that being the first runners is also in this it's also sometimes it's critical too, right? I think we are much more conscious now about the prevalence of different types of violence. And for that, the different studies realized, not only in Spain, but especially the UNICEF and the European and the UNICEF survey has helped a lot. And especially the message that this is mediating the academic careers. I think that is what is really new. Before it was that we had harassment, right? But yeah, that's important. So this message of that gender-based violence occurs and it's mediating this academic career. It's also changing a message which is important in the sense that the good institution is not the one which doesn't have denounces and cases, but the one that recognizes the problem and tackles it with policies, right? For that, it's still quite symbolic, but it is important. For example, it was the ministry was answering that in an official response last week. And for that, of course, the work of the subgroup and the code of conduct for zero tolerance is helping a lot. But also, we are also conscious about the limitations. I mean, the more we learn, the more we know we are limited. And we have learned hard-won lessons, right, during the implementation of these protocols. We have a very positive legislation, that's true, but also the very type of instrument that we have, that is I mean, it was designed that it is a protocol, leads really to mainly respond with a priority for the P of prosecution and advocates the institutional responses very frequently to failure, because it's the prosecution. We know that we have a lot of problems. And of course, this is especially important in Spain. It happens also in other countries, but the possibilities of the prosecution, for example, from universities, is absolutely limited. The penal law is above what the administrative law, which can be used by universities. And the law by default is very garantist, so it is very easy to delay the process, re-victimization, everything. So it is not surprising what we got into the UNICEF, with the UNICEF survey, about that only 13% of the people denounces. And that's the instrument we have. So that's a problem. This is really what we would like to do, and I think the UNICEF and GenderSAFE framework is helping a lot, also with the 7P models, right? So this is important. but for example, and this is important in the sense that with some of the protocols, there have been some developments trying to sort out this kind of protocols limitations, and some of what it is called informal procedures are being developed. So it's a way of not leaving only to the prosecution through the protocol, but trying to have other kinds of interactions with the people and who have a problem with that. But of course, we are also conscious of how under-resourced are the equality units in the universities and in the research centers. We are also conscious about the lack of intersectionality. We, as in Ireland, I mean, we do not talk about gender-based violence, but sexual and sexist or based on sex harassment. And we have a problem with, in my country, we have a problem with the intersectionality in the university. Yeah, in the universities, maybe more or less the intersectionality with sexual diversity has been a little bit more advanced, but not with other inequalities. So yeah, this is also the thing. But of course, we also are very crucial about the lack of accountability and the lack of monitoring, even if in the legislation there is a word on monitoring. So if I would have had the chance to answer the GenderSAFE survey, that I couldn't because I am in the ministry only from January, I would say yes, there is a monitoring thing. But I can tell you that this has not occurred yet. Of course, this is something good for working for me in that. But of course, just for saying about the enabler prevalence studies, the failures, the studies on implementation that we also did in the UNICEF, and the European policies and projects are helping a lot. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Also because you recalled a few points that emerge from Slido, this lack of attention toward intersectionality and the lack of accountability. And I'm sure we will have time to discuss this at a later stage afterwards. Now let's turn to the role of higher education institutions, research performing organization, and research funding organization, and their cooperation with national authorities. And Jenny, this time I will start with you because the Higher Education Authority has a long history of developing trainings and policies, and in doing this with in coordination with research organization. Can you share how this is done concretely, please?
Yeah, so I might share. Oh, sorry for the echo.
Can you speak into the microphone so that people online can also?
Is that better? Yeah? Okay. So yeah, we do have a strong tradition of kind of consultation with our sector, especially in equality, diversity and inclusion work. So we're very conscious that, you know, higher education institutions have to implement the policies. So we want to ensure that they're ambitious, but that they're also achievable. So I could give the example of the consultation that we did just for the review that we conducted of our Ending Sexual Violence and Harassment framework. So the expert group that were involved conducted consultation with senior leaders for equality, diversity and inclusion in our higher education institutions, the sexual violence prevention and response managers that I mentioned earlier, or people that were in kind of equivalent roles that maybe where their institution doesn't have this particular type of funding. We also have an expert advisory group on ending sexual violence and harassment, so we had a consultation session for them. Also undergraduate, postgraduate and international students. This was a really, really important and fundamental session for this consultation, and some of the students had experienced higher education in other countries. You know, they had come to Ireland as a postgraduate or in other ways. And this was actually really useful in terms of providing that point of reflection on how things are done or what they had seen or experienced in other places as well. There was also consultation with trade union representatives, human resources representatives, and then we have a new national agency in Ireland that's responsible for our the action plans relating to our national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence called CUAN. So we had a consultative meeting with them, and also our parent department, which is the ministry called the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. So I'm competing with Magda for the long titles there. But this was made up basically of structured consultation meetings for each of those groups with our expert group, and then they were all held online, and then we also accepted written submissions. So there was really, really rich feedback and discussion that came out of that. And you know, we just the expert group conducted all this consultation and we facilitated it, but kind of being in the room and being able to hear all that was really valuable and really helps us going forward. In terms of monitoring, then, that's something as well that we always try to develop in tandem with higher education institutions that we work with. So we're very aware that nobody wants to spend all their time on reporting, but I think that institutions really realise the value of having this topic in particular included in things like their annual governance statements, which means, you know, their governing authority has to sign off that they are complying with what's required. But also then we monitor progress against the 15 outcomes that are in the current framework. So institutions get to self-assess their progress, which means they can define success in a way that's appropriate to their context and set indicators then for that success. So that's really important, where you have autonomous institutions that are all quite different and, you know, have kind of different student populations, different focuses. So this is really valuable. We also have the sexual violence prevention and response managers that I mentioned. They are key members of our practitioner network, which is basically a community of practice. And they're a fantastic group of really dedicated people working in this area, in the sector. So that group kind of runs itself, comes together to share knowledge and kind of discuss things together, which I think is really helpful in terms of how they approach the monitoring and reporting side as well, and how they work with us. So we absolutely haven't perfected this at all, or, you know, we really don't want a situation where more time is spent on reporting than on this prevention and response work. And we know how hard that practitioners are working, so we really want to support them in this with both policies and monitoring that are meaningful and kind of help them to advance this work. So yeah, it's an ongoing project to keep this going.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for showing us the broad group of stakeholders with whom you work in Ireland. Raffaella, now I turn to you, because you have presented how the HERA is a reference point, and Austria has also a strong coordination mechanism at the national level, related in particular with the implementation of the HERA policies, including those on inclusive gender equality. Can we hear more about how this cooperation works in practice, and specifically on policies to combat gender-based violence?
So I think the National Action Plan for the European Research Area is a good example for this. So I will talk about this in the next few minutes. We call it ERA-NUP, so it's a shorter name. So the ERA-NUP is the translation of the ERA policy agenda, so the national translation, into, to be concrete, 15 national priorities, including one for inclusive gender equality. And what we really like, I guess, in Austria is to develop something together. So we did it with the ERA-NUP as well. And for the last ERA-NUP, this was up to 2025, so just a few months ago, and especially our gender equality initiative. How did we develop this? So we took the ERA policy agenda, the Action 5, and we adapted the content, or the priorities there, and weighted them interministerially. So our ministry and now the Ministry for Innovation, Mobility and Infrastructure. And then we discussed them with a broad stakeholder group from the research and higher education community to develop and formulate the measures together. And these representatives from this working group or from the stakeholder group, they were nominated from the leadership or the heads of the institutions. So yeah, that's how we wanted to gain the most effect for the measures. And for the new ERA-NUP, which is from 2026 to 2028, it was published, I think, 2 weeks ago. So we are continuing several initiatives from the old ERA-NUP, including measures on gender-based violence. So the status quo survey I talked about was a measure of the old ERA-NUP, and the work with the recommendations is integrated in the new ERA-NUP. And there again, coordination and cooperation with stakeholders is essential. So, and this is why we are now putting in place a dedicated working group on gender-based violence to agree on a shared definition of gender-based violence and to set out clear structures and processes for prevention, reporting, and support. And this framework will be developed together with the institutions and with the external support from the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute for Fundamental and Human Rights. And the working group will include representatives of all higher education sectors, of non-university research and research funding institutions, of national authorities, staff and student unions, and experts from NGOs and other relevant contact points. So we want to have common standards where everybody can agree to, and then the concrete implementation has to be adapted to each institution and from institution itself. So, and then in addition, we make use of existing tools and networking forums. For example, next week there will be an annual networking forum on gender and diversity competence, where gender-based violence is a regular main topic. And cooperation, of course, is also important. So there is in the field of art and culture, there is a contact point, an independent contact point for cases of harassment and violence. This is called Vera. And I'm really glad that one representative of Vera will be part of our working group too. So yeah, I think we can learn a lot from them for the higher education and research sector. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafaela. Maria, let's talk about Spain. There is this coordination group for public university that also has periodic meetings with research organization organized by the unit that you lead now, the Women and Science unit. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? How does it work?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Marta. More than the unit organizing, there are different like networks. And for example, in this case, there is, for example, like more a technical network of the equality units in the different universities, which is called WIHEU. And also there is the Conference of Rectors, which is more the political part. And now in the Conference of Rectors, there is a specific group on gender policies. So there's a way to work towards both the technical and the political, and they are working quite well together. So this is something. But of course, from the ministry, it's more like in the Austrian case. We are talking about a ministry which is at the federal level, to say, the national level. So there is, and also, for example, universities in Spain, they have a lot of autonomy, and also they have the regional, right, like the regional part. So this is what we can do, is more kind of coordination. But the good thing is that the unit that I conducted, that is the unit of women and science, is supposed to be like a transversal unit for doing gender mainstreaming in the whole ministry. And now, and this is the good news, is the Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities, because from 2020 to 2023, it was split, the Ministry of Science and Innovation in one side and universities in the other. So, for example, in the standing group and then in the later subgroup, there was only one part. So this is really good in this sense, also because as what do I have in the ministry umbrella? We have not only these universities, but we also have within this part of the universities, the ANECA is the National Accreditation Agency. So it's the agency evaluating everything, careers, programs and everything. But also under the research thing, there is the CSIC, that is like the big national research with more than 100 research centers in Spain. But also we have under the innovation part, the CEDETI. The CEDETI is the Center for the Development, the Industrial and Technology Development. So it's the whole thing about the financial funds for entrepreneurship and innovation. And we also have the big RFO in Spain, that is the national agency. So I have all these different actors that I hope to be able to put together to work in some place. We have there is also this observatory created, but that I want to renew it in the sense that it was more thought about like an interministries work. And I think we have more than enough what we have within the ministry. So I would rather, I'm going to try to modify that to really have this coordination. And of course, the legislation is a good base for starting, for example, the implementation of the monitoring, and maybe even the evaluation. So thank you very much, because I think that the GenderSAFE assessment tool and the toolkits and the subgroup and the zero tolerance code of conduct, it is a very good way to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Magda, what about Poland? Does the ministry and how engage with the higher education institutions?
Thank you, Marta. Yes, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education in Poland cooperates with the representatives of higher education institutions and research organizations through their participation in ministerial consultative advisory bodies and teams. And they elaborate a set of recommendations that are later translated into ministerial plans, as I mentioned in my previous intervention. So there were these two advisory bodies that worked over last year, and they translated into concrete proposals announced by the ministry. But apart from that, the ministry cooperates with higher education institutions and research organizations through supporting various projects, initiatives, trainings that they conduct at Polish universities. And the example of such initiative is a project entitled "What is Allowed at a University? Undesired Behaviors and How to Respond When They Occur." So it was a series of trainings conducted for students, doctoral candidates, and academic staff by members of the Academic Network for Safety and Equality, which is a kind of community of practice in Poland with equality officers that are entrusted by the institutions with the protection of academic rights, values, safety, equality, and diversity. And this series of trainings was conducted in autumn last year, usually in smaller higher education institutions. And the ministry supported financially this initiative. Modules presented in this training concerned such issues as undesirable behaviors at universities, how to react to them, what are the disciplinary proceedings provided by the law, and issues concerning this area. And the other initiative that I would like to highlight is called Academia Without Violence. And it was also like a very practical series of sessions, workshops led by legal and mental health specialists. And it was designed to equip the academic community, the participants of this session, with very practical knowledge and tools on how to react also to gender-based violence. How to build a safe space also for conversations with those who experience violence and abuse. And I would also like to mention the JEB monitoring study that we commissioned some 2 years ago. And I'm mentioning that because I think it provided a really valuable space for higher education institutions, research organizations to reflect on how they implement JEB, what are the obstacles, what hurdles they encounter, and how to overcome them. But also reflection on the mental well-being of gender equality officers in those institutions. And of course, it gave us a very valuable feedback on what the situation looks like when it comes to gender equality plans implementation at Polish institutions. And also, the report ended with recommendations that concern also the topic of eradicating gender-based violence at institutions.
Thank you very much, Magda, also for mentioning the importance of gender equality plans, because now we are going to discuss about a broader picture, the EU and the coordination with the EU. So also this morning, Maria Pilar Fernandez, she also mentioned the importance of gender equality plans that since 2022 are mandatory. The GenderSAFE policy mapping shows that there is no direct link in terms of cause effect between the recent EU policy developments and the national level developments, but these two have happened at the same time with no specific cause effect linked. But in any case, gender equality plans plays a role, and so the EU, of course, plays a role in terms of coordination. And Rafaela, now I will start with you, also because you mentioned, you explained to us the strong HERA coordination mechanism that you have in Austria. So can you tell us more?
So yes, that's true. We have a really strong national ERA coordination mechanism with different working groups and information tools. So for instance, the ERA Stakeholder Forum, which is a forum between national authorities and stakeholders. We have a new coordination group for the new ERA NAP initiatives, and we have annual ERA symposium and the ERA portal, and so on. This means that we have inter-ministerial cooperation, with intra-ministerial cooperation, but also with stakeholders. So we try to closely link EU level developments to our national ERA coordination mechanism. And so, as I said, the ERA policy agenda is directly translated into our ERA NAP, which we develop and implement in participation. And furthermore, and I think this is important too, we have a strong and sometimes informal updating mechanism between the representatives in different EU forums or subgroups or whatever. I think this is really important, just to pick up the phone and tell, have you heard this or that? And yeah, okay. But in particular, I would say that 3 points are very important for us. So, of course, this is the framework and the political support on EU level. So, again, the ERA policy agenda and the work from the subgroup on inclusive gender equality in the ERA was extremely important and valuable for us. It provided us with guidance and clear priorities, for instance, that zero tolerance of gender-based violence is or should be a European norm. And this makes it, of course, much easier to argue on national level. So that prevention and action against gender-based violence, they are standards of quality, of excellence, and of international competitiveness. And they're not just a voluntary extra task or whatever. And the second is data and common standards. So studies like UNICEF, they made the extent of gender-based violence in academia visible and comparable. And they also showed that this is not a national problem, or in my case, an Austrian problem, but it is a systematic challenge throughout Europe. And as I said before, we cannot do nothing here. And as easy as it sounds, but this puts pressure on us to act, and but also increases opportunities for learning. So we can use successful models, we can use the UNICEF toolkit, and we do not have to start from the very beginning in every country. And this leads me directly to my third point, mutual learning and promising practices. The exchange and the learning within the different project groups or ERA forum subgroup, this is extremely important, this is extremely valuable. And we see a wide range of examples, and we can try to adapt these experiences into our national context and framework.
Thank you very much, Rafaela. Maria, what about Spain?
I mean, it is crucial, and I'm not going to repeat all what Rafaela has said so well, because it is exactly, I would say, about the mutual learning and the importance. But I would add that in Spain, if a policy or message is endorsed by Europe, it carries more weight and is viewed more favorably. And we need to use this, of course. And it's, I think it's really good, the importance, guidance, and endorsements that the European Commission is, and the ERA and the subgroup is doing, because I mean, and especially, for example, the JEP eligibility criterion has been extremely important, to say that, and I guess I do not have the evidence, to say that, but I have the impression that all the developments, even in regarding the protocols and the gender violence thing, have been a little bit provoked by this eligibility criterion. It has been like nervous thing. We have to do something, right? And I think this is extremely important, for example, in all the research centers. I mean, it's so important to be eligible, right, for Horizon Europe, that this is really important. But I will just add that in the case of the ministry in Spain, the same as in Austria, because of this federal thing, we are precisely the mediating thing between Europe and the rest of the research and higher education ecosystem. So I can tell you that from the ministry we really need, and we will use all these European resources. So I am really grateful, because we are going to work from the ministry in this case.
Thank you very much, Maria. Jenny, what about Ireland?
Yeah, I think Rafaela and Maria have set me up very nicely for this. You've mentioned so many important things already, but like I think we all in the room probably would like our institutions to act on these things out of their duty of care to staff and students, but the European level work acts as really important levers for institutional action and progress to be taken. So we were talking about, you know, gender equality plans, and in Ireland we were really lucky that we had kind of a framework for gender equality plans in place already before the Horizon Europe requirement. So, you know, it was brilliant when the requirement came along. Now everybody is aiming for a common standard, but we also have this flexibility that we can reflect our national context within what we're doing. So I think it was really, really welcomed, and it's quite similar with the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct as well, in terms of gender-based violence, because higher education institutions in Ireland were already implementing or developing their policies when this was published, but now they have a document to reflect on and discuss with peers across the European research area. So this is really important. You know, it's like a foundation for knowledge sharing. So even if people are creating policies that look different, there's something in common that we can all use to discuss. And you both mentioned EU projects as well, like the monitoring that we're here to discuss today, the GenderSAFE monitoring. This is really, really important in terms of being able to benchmark and track progress and, you know, look at this national picture. So these things emerging from the European context are so important, no matter where, you know, whether you're just starting on trying to implement policy or you're at that, you know, you're trying to embed it and develop it further. And yeah, I think we're all very positive about the communities of practice that exist, whether these are through the ERAFORM subgroup, the Gender Action Plus or GenderSAFE or other European projects. These are brilliant for national authorities as well, in terms of just learning from colleagues and having those relationships and being able to sense check maybe something new you're going to introduce or you're thinking about. So yeah, all I can do is really just agree with my colleagues on how important they are, and events like this as well that just bring people into the same room and to be able to have these conversations is really, really important. So yeah, thank you, Europe.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And Magda, let's close with you.
Yes, you put me in a really difficult situation because
Exactly.
all the things that I have meticulously prepared have already been mentioned, but still let me underline things that are important from Polish perspective. So indeed, JEP as eligibility criterion has really had a catalyzing effect on the presence of JEPs in Poland. And as I mentioned, Poland is considering introducing mandatory legal JEP requirement, and in this regard, I think measures targeting gender-based violence should also become an essential component of this national requirement. The JEP monitoring survey in Poland has shown that indeed Polish institutions, like 92% of Polish institutions have already undertaken measures addressing gender-based violence, and it is especially common among higher education institutions. But research organizations also are very active in this regard. Yeah, work within the ERA context, within the ERA Forum subgroup cannot be overestimated. And right now, when we have ERA Policy Agenda 25-27 in full swing, we must strengthen our collective efforts to deliver on the expected outcomes. And one of these outcomes also refers to the implementation of the zero tolerance code of conduct on gender-based violence. And yes, as the findings from the mapping of national policies showed, a pillar that deserves particular attention is the accountability pillar, where we see most pronounced deficits. So EU-level collaboration, policy coordination in terms of developing accountability mechanism, reporting duties, leadership responsibilities is something that deserves our strengthened attention, I would say. And also taking this work undertaken at the EU level later to the national level and designing measures when it comes to accountability and compliance with the requirements regarding gender-based violence. Yes, and also outcomes of the EU projects addressing gender-based violence are really worth mentioning, as the results can translate into advances at the national level when it comes to measures targeting gender-based violence. And one of such example that came to my mind is the GIM tool, which can be very beneficial for institutions that are planning to design the gender equality plan, because through this online survey they can collect really reliable, high quality data that can help them design measures that are tailor-made and really specific to the institutions, also in the area of gender-based violence. And of course, the self-assessment tool that Lut has described today is also, I think it can be also very, very beneficial for institutions working in the domain of gender-based violence.
Thank you very much, Magda. And before we move to the very last questions that I have for you, let's ask the audience what they think about what is the most needed in the next phase to strengthen national frameworks against gender-based violence in RNI and Horizon Europe. Horizon, all right. Higher education. Political will. Accountability, a term that gains importance, that we saw also in the previous reply. Real commitment to intersectionality. Sanctions. Resources. Effective monitoring. There are other people that are writing. Trauma-informed approach. awareness. Okay. Okay, I think that before we open the floor to question and comments, can you share, please, one priority for the coming 12 to 18 months to ensure a sustained implementation of the zero tolerance policies to end gender-based violence?
I will say 2 or 3. No, but clearly monitoring implementation. This is one of the things, and eventually also the evaluation of protocols effectiveness. And I would say in the case of Spain is proposing action plans beyond protocols. And that's and also this sending this clear message of the institution, the good institution is the one, not the one not receiving, not having cases, but the one really having them, and this would be also important. These three things.
Thank you very much, Rafaela.
So this question is very easy for me. So for the next 12 to 18th month is the translation of the results and recommendations of the survey. With a clear commitment and broad cooperation, and with the result to develop a shared definition and minimum standards. Yeah, just one.
Thank you very much. Magda.
So at the national level, I would say that for me really important will be going forward with this anti-discrimination package that I mentioned at the very beginning of our discussion, and working hand in hand in dialogue with the stakeholders in this endeavor, and also focusing on the long-term sustainability so as to avoid the risk of policy weakening and ensure implementation over a longer course of time. And when it comes to the EU level, I think the forthcoming ERA Act will be really important to move forward with the implementation of the improved working conditions for researchers, and to strengthen also national efforts in this regard. Thank you.
Jenny.
Yeah, it's very hard to just pick one thing, but at national level, obviously updating our framework and kind of completing that process is a huge priority at the moment. But at EU level, I think there's, and it's coming up there in the Slido as well, that it would be really valuable to have more EU collaboration on trauma-informed approaches to this work, both for staff and students that are experiencing violence, but also for those working to end violence in higher education. I think this would be really supportive and something that could be developed collaboratively that we all need on a national level.
Thank you very much to all of you, and please a big applause for our panelists before we open the floor. Now it's time for Q&A with the audience. So before we open the floor here, I would like to read the questions that have been posted in the chats before. So, well, the first question is if there is a specific reason why victim-centered is a terminology used instead of survivor-centered. And I think that this is mainly for the first speakers, Marcela.
Yeah, we tend to use victim survivor centered, and I think that this is what we have in the Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct. In discussions before, I think it's important to mention that both are important because there is a trajectory of how people experience violence and manage that experience. And so some people may be and may need support that is specific to experiencing the situation as a victim. and then through that support to then move to survivorship. And I think that it is important for that reason to have both of these, both the words in, and if we have victim-centered in the graphs, it's for brevity's sake. But for the report, it's victim survivor centered.
Thank you, Marcela. Of course, if you want to react online, please feel free to raise your hand and we will give you the floor. If you prefer, you can also write on the chat, but of course, you are free to take the floor. I see that Sarah just replied. There is another questions about the tool. Is the tool adapted for use by civil society organization, NGO beyond member states? And can the tool be used beyond the EU, for example, OECD countries? I think that Lutz, this is mainly for you.
The tool can be used by institutions wherever they are, but the experience that we have is in the EU plus associated countries. But there is no reason why it would not be applicable or irrelevant for institutions based in other countries. Now, it is tailored to higher education institutions and research organizations, so it's not really adapted, neither for NGOs, civil society organizations, not even really for research funding bodies. So it would need an adaptation to make it fit these other types of organizations.
Let me see if there is any reaction online. If not, I will read the following one and then I will open the floor. I think that this is a follow-up. So if an organization wants to adapt it, what are the procedures to follow?
To contact us. we can exchange about it, but I would say it's pretty challenging. It took us long to do it through multiple cycles of revision and feedback, validation, refinement, because it has to be consistent. We call it horizontally, and when we say horizontally, we mean across the stages of institutionalization, and vertically in stages of institutionalization across all the impact drivers and all the indicators. So it is definitely a very challenging job to adapt it.
Thank you very much, Lutz. So there is another question. In what capacity, if any, has UNICEF and GenderSAFE collaborated with the European Institute for Gender Equality when it comes to toolkits? Has this toolkit been integrated into into EGE's toolkit GEAR?
To my knowledge, not yet. And for this to happen, it is necessary to go through the European Commission. So to the extent that we have information, this would need to happen on the interface between DG Research and DG Just, and from DG Just to go to EGE. So of course, it is worthwhile to explore this, and we will see with our project officer whether that would be possible, but it is quite complicated inter-institutional matter. We cannot go directly to EGE. That's the short answer.
Thank you, Marcela. Let's see if there are any questions here. If not, there are a few more online. Any reaction, comments, ideas? Yes, Lut, please.
Thank you. Magda mentioned that sustainability is a priority, but my question is in fact addressed to all of you. What, what do you do and what can you do to bolster your policies and to protect them against backsliding?
I would say this is an excellent question, Lud, and with not very clear clear answers. But from my point of view, it would be to try to put everything in monitoring especially and evaluation within each of the organizations, not depending on the coordination, on the national coordination, for example, or but really try to have this I mean, transmitting all these that can be, and the assessment tools and the need for accountability and all those things, try to really transmit and that really the different organizations can appropriate that. That's a really general answer, but that would be this is my intention.
Not asking an easy question there, Lute, but I think like what's come out of today and the monitoring is really that focus on accountability, you know, is really, really important, and we all need to work harder to move towards that. But also, I think the more we can mainstream these policies and make everybody in every institution think that they have a role to play in this, that will really help. You know, no matter what happens on a larger context, if this is something that everybody sees as part of their role in their everyday work, then that's a way to kind of keep it on the agenda and on everybody's minds.
What I would add to that is focusing maybe on developing whole of government approach, building community around issues that are important for all ministries and for academic community in a given country. And yeah, as we've heard from our keynote speaker, measures targeting gender-based violence are directly linked to advancing scientific excellence, like working conditions for researchers. So it is a topic that should unite, not divide, stakeholders in a given country.
And I would agree to all the things, of course, but would add, so especially in the Austrian context, where we now have this window of opportunity with a feminist minister, use all the existing tools and instruments and integrate it, like in performance agreements or other plans.
I would add something because I was thinking, and for example, I think that a strong manifestos or commitments. For example, I was just 3 days ago, I knew about that many activities of the March the 8th in different universities, they have been a little boycotted, I mean, by students. So we really have a problem. We have to open a critical conversation about why this is happening. But at the same time, I was trying to think what, for example, from the ministry we can do. And what we are going to try to do is to send a clear message, because the response by the university was suspending activities, because it was. So this is the worst response. Having like a clear manifesto and an idea, guidance of what to do in these cases, and relate, gender things with democracy, and do like a statement on that, and some guidance, maybe that would be a good idea. I would try to do it through the Conference of Rectors, but it's not easy. I mean, just for having another response about what to do.
please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lila Mastora. I am a research associate for the University of Athens. Thank you all so much. Like, you have shared so many things, so much information to go and look through when we go back home. So we saw earlier when you had the research, like some countries that they had no data. I don't know if they were not included in the research, but Greece was one that had no data, and I'm sure that we don't have any data. And this is, I think, very much connected also to something that you have mentioned a lot, like political will, and also coming from academia, I've seen that it's quite dominated by men, and I think that this is also very connected to the lack of political will as well. So what would you suggest? What could we do to move forward when you have so many tools, but we wouldn't even be able to use them because we lack this will? Thank you.
Maria.
I would say having the eligibility criterion into, and say, you really need to do this because if you want some European money. And of course, all what we are doing here, I would say. And of course, the work by the subgroup in the ERA forum, I think it's extremely important to do that. And of course, having these alliances among all the different countries, and of course, helping each other to this.
Marcela, please.
I would add for the Czech Republic, like, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, we did not have anything either. It was very difficult. The political will was not there at the institutional level. And in our case, it was really students who came together and, started putting this on the table. We had multiple initiatives, really vocal ones. But you can also see how that makes the students extremely vulnerable and exposed. And, it's essentially displacing the burden of institutional responsibility on the students. But they were really fundamental for also the work that we try to do in our Center for Gender and Science in the Czech Republic. And then that coalesced, ministry caught on. We had cases in 2021 almost on a weekly basis in the media because students started coming out, and then it really snowballed. But really the fact that students started speaking out was vital for this.
If there are no other reply, we have let me see if there are any other people that I take the order, because we have another question online. Understanding gender-based violence through an ecological model framework where gender-based violence is recognized as existing within the wider societal context is critical to take in its systematic nature. How can higher education authorities and institutions strengthen this ecological model approach?
Everyone's asking really hard questions today, but it's really good. It's good to think about these things. Yeah, I think it's understanding, like, some countries we have those kind of whole of government policies or whole of society approaches to this. So it's about leveraging where those exist, leveraging, a formal policy or route. Where it doesn't exist, it's about leveraging the communities and, contacts and things that we have. But I think it's that idea of trying to work across agencies or institutions to share knowledge, but to acknowledge that, we all have a common goal here. It's to end the violence. So if we can just try and keep people in the room together. But yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think I'm trying to say it's about partnership and working together.
Thank you, and feel free to react online. I see. So just to let you know that there are quite a few requests to have the slides published afterwards. So this will be done. There are also requests to summarize the development of policies uptake, and another question online, what about the member states where there are budgetary cuts for research, including for gender equality research? Who is to support university and research centers implement all these policies if there are no knowledge supported and produced?
I just will try to say something. I mean, it's really difficult to think, and I mean, I think we should say, at least in my country, the far right is really stating, is negating gender violence. So if they reach the government, and this is already happening at the regional level in Spain, it's I think we need to do something as a society, and this is the case, and of course trying to relate all the time. But we have the world we have, right? But trying to relate all the time gender policies with democracy. I think it's the most important thing. But what I'm saying is really, I mean, what you can do if you do not have the resources and the political will. I don't know. I would say just take the streets, right, and go all together, and that's it, and try to convince our the citizenship a better way to vote, right? That's it. Sorry.
Marcela, please. Rafaela.
Just one short thing. So I think evidence and data is especially important when it comes to lies from the far right people. So in Austria we have the same situation. So we are now lucky until 2029, and then we do not know what happens. And on regional level, it looks much more different than on federal level. And what I see is that gender-based violence is always or often connected from these far-right people with racism, and that's why we have to have data and evidence to stand against these lies and prejudices, and yeah.
Thank you. Jenny, or
It's you know, it's not the same thing, but this is another area where I think the European context is really important. We want to see gender-based violence and other important topics represented in EU funding programs, and be able to, you know, work collaboratively on projects like GenderSAFE, and so these things being part of European programs is really important. Also, you know, gender-based violence is a recommended area in gender equality plans at the moment. If this was mandatory, you know, this would be another lever and way to send that message at national level that this needs to be prioritized, and this is part of the eligibility criterion as well. So.
And I will just add, I mean, there are very important documents now being negotiated in the European Parliament and with member states in the Council. And so I would really urge people to, at national level with your colleagues or on your own, try to find a representative in the European Parliament from your country level that can be amenable to your arguments, or liaise with your policymakers at the national level. And if you have a group of gender scholars or gender equality officers, and you care and you want to really, you know, push, then now is the time to say, look, this is important, we need it. Because if the policymakers, you know, get this message clearly from the national level, chances are that you know, we will be able to build a coalition now during the negotiations of the ERA Act that was mentioned, and the next framework program, the Horizon Europe 2834, and it's really happening now.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? I don't see any. So I think that we have some time to take the other questions online that we have. So there is a message explaining that another GL tool update has been planned under the Gender Equality Competence Facility. The latest update did Inspire Project 2 years ago. GEAR is Gender Equality in Academia and Research, the acronym. There is another. Can you? There is no. There is another question. I was wondering whether you have any additional insights into how partnership between university, NGOs, and civil society actors, such as students' association, actually work in practice in your country, and to what extent they are effective or face challenges.
I think it is extremely important, and for example, Marcela's example in the Czech Republic, really it's a case, I mean, about what it was. It is true that students are changing. At least I have this impression in Spain. So maybe we need really to work towards these. Of course, we will need them, but probably also another NGOs and other all different stakeholders to support that. So I would say not only leaving to to students in this case. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have a final question. I think, given that the time is running out, there is a significant lack of accountability at the executive and governing body levels of higher education institutions where mismanagement or purposes hiding of staff gender-based violence is common practice. What, if any, mechanisms are available at the European level to assure accountability of leaders? I think that we can take note of these questions. We will think about it, and for sure there is some food for thought to discuss and to think about and brainstorm about it. Okay, I think that we don't have any other question online or here. So at this point, I will give the floor back to Marcela Linkova, who will.
And can I have the slides, please? So the slides should be coming up. So first of all, I really want to thank everyone for engaging, discussing, and staying. On the slides, I will have a little bit about the next steps. So we shared the report today, but we have not published it online because we wanted to take advantage of what gets said here in the panel as well and the questions that we have, and we will integrate that in the report. So the report will be out before the end of the month, incorporating the discussions and further insights. And then we will share it, of course, with everyone who has been here together with the slides. The slides will be coming soon. In the slide, in the PowerPoint presentation, you will also see that the GenderSAFE is developing other tools apart from, and Lut presented one, which is available. Fantastic, thank you. So the institutional self-assessment tool, it's really, I would say, one instrument that makes us proud is available, and institutions should be encouraged to make use of it. But we also are developing capacity building under the leadership of Yellow Window, and those are also available. So if you want to make use of the capacity building recordings that we have, please do. And colleagues at Knowledge and Innovation and Central European University are also working on a model policy framework. And this will be, I mean, it's a draft is already available online, which you can access. But we will have a refined version in September or October. And this is really an important instrument that we will have that will be state-of-the-art in terms of what institutional policies should cover and how it is possible to tackle it. It will not tell you how to do it at your institution, but it will give you options of how to look at the individual issues, how you can set up reporting, what to take into consideration when you're considering anonymous reporting, for example, etc. So it will really be a very comprehensive array of items that an institutional policy needs to tackle. We have already the date for our final conference, so if you want to join us, this will be in Vienna in January next year. So please do. And so now also for the more overarching messages. As I already said, and we have mentioned it several times, we are really at a critical juncture now in terms of EU policymaking, not least because of the negotiations of the ERA Act and the Next Horizon Europe. And being where we are in Europe and the European Parliament being changed, it is of course clear that the democratic voices and pro-gender equality and feminist forces join so that we ensure that we can continue with going forward with equality, diversity and inclusiveness policies, because at national level as well as in the European Parliament we are aware that this will not be straightforward. Hence the previous call on everyone to also join and make our voices heard towards our national policymakers and representatives in the Parliament. It has also been mentioned that our higher education institutions are changing, and we have growing evidence of divergence in value orientations among especially young women and men. And I think that this will be posing a new challenge to our higher education and research environments, because, as I said at the beginning, higher education and research are hierarchical systems where we have a lot of young people, a lot of young adults. And if we do not think how research organizations and higher education organizations will navigate this changing landscape, where you have a lot more awareness about mental health issues, non-binary people rights, etc., together with the conservative voices that also Maria alluded to. This is a new situation for all of us, and I think that we really need to pay attention to this to make sure that really we have systems that can propagate democratic values. The Commissioner for Research, Innovation and Startups has the ambition to make Europe the best place for women researchers to work in by 2030, I think. So, I mean, with today's discussions and all the challenges ahead, I think that we have a lot of work ahead of us. But we should not despair, because our monitoring also showed really significant progress that we have made just in 5 years. And I can say how proud I am of what we collectively are managing to achieve at the EU level through cooperation. And we have also heard about how important the coordination and the ability to learn from another at the EU level are. So with this, I want to thank all of you, thank the panelists. Marta, thank you for wonderful moderation, and also Ceps for hosting us today. Thank you for everyone online for staying with us, and thank you also for Anastasia and Lud for their presentations, and I guess we can close. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Marcela. So it's my turn now to thank everybody, but I won't repeat what Marcela said in a better way. So thank you all. Thanks. I would like to thank the audience here in the room, but I also would like to thank people participating online that were also very active with questions. I would like to thank all the speakers. I would like to thank the panelists for their amazing presentation and all the inputs that you presented today. We have now our lunch. And now we have some time to discuss about this more informally. So I invite you to go to our room. That is, when you go out, there are some stairs. You go downstairs, and there you will find lunch. But again, thank you very much for your participation and for your presentations today.